All right, folks, welcome in. This is DWH Football. I'm Dalen Huderberg. We're here today to talk about linebackers for the Dallas Cowboys. This is a continuation of my positional perspective series. Covered corners and linebackers to this point in more of an article format. I'll put some links down for that just in case you are interested. Obviously, we're just a couple days out from the draft here. Was hoping to get some more positional perspective stuff put out by now, but it's been a crazy couple months. And I did want to watch a little bit of this draft class, just get an idea of where things were at. I'm not going to be putting out a draft board or anything. I don't feel like I've really had enough time to study the class that way, so I'll be looking to do that next year. But I didn't want to recap the Cowboys draft with no knowledge of the players, so that's what I've been kind of focusing on. But just to roll into it, the way I've been formatting these positional perspectives is with a past, present, and future structure. I think it's important, especially as fans, we get really caught up in what 2025 was like, to remember what the state of things was in 2024, preseason 2025, and then what's going to be happening in 2026 for us. Linebacker for the Cowboys, I think, is tough to start at just 2024, because 2024 to me was really refreshing, actually, especially when compared to the years prior. If we're being honest, it's been a truly brutal stretch at linebacker for the Cowboys going back years and years. We saw the fall of the once promising duo of Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith. You lost Micah Parsons to the edge room, and then we had to watch Marquise Bell at 205 pounds try and fill in run gaps for a whole season. So simply put, Eric Kendricks and Marvion Overshown together were probably the best thing to happen to this unit in a long time. Maybe going back to Rolando McClain and Sean Lee and stuff like that. Which is why it was so disappointing to enter 2025 without either of Kendricks or Overshown available to play. Obviously, Overshown didn't, was injured and was rehabbing, wasn't going to be able to come back until partway through the year. And Kendricks wasn't brought back, rather inexplicably. The Cowboys' solution to this lack of talent in the linebacker room was the trade for Kenneth Murray and his large contract. This was met with a healthy dose of skepticism from fans and analysts, national or Cowboy specific, because Murray's been in the league for a couple years now and he has a history of poor play. In contrast, that cheap signing of Jack Sanborn, who had previously been more of a backup for the Bears, had us murmuring optimistically about, this guy knows how to diagnose plays. He has a working knowledge of the scheme that Eberflus is going to be bringing over. Then from the draft came 5th round pick Shamar James, who had a lot of physical upside, a little bit of a hybrid safety guy in college, at least earlier in his career, and really drew some comparisons from the previous year's draft pick, Maurice Luafau. Luafau had a flawed rookie season in 2024, but the big hitting backer showed enough potential that you'd think he'd play a role going forward at least. But of course, all of this was really overshadowed by the eventual return of DeMarvion Overshown. And the success of the unit as a whole really seemed to hinge on his ability to return from yet another knee injury. And that leads us into the 2025, the present. And I knew going into this, just from watching the games live, that linebacker tape was not going to be a fun experience. Can I say it was awful? Can I say it was brutal? It's just football tape. I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but can I say that I hated doing it? Yeah, I can. It was very frustrating. Do you think the secondary tape was frustrating? No. Cue up any game you like and watch these players try and get in position. Watch them point at each other and shift as the ball is snapped and not even get lined up consistently. Watch Kareem Hunt get like a 4 or 5 yard carry in the red zone that really ought to have been a tackle for loss because someone tells Overshown he's in the wrong gap. He moves to stand right next to Kenneth Murray, and the offense runs into the empty hole that he left. There's so much of that on this tape. Kenneth Murray is not a middle linebacker in the NFL. I don't think we had a good green dot guy out there, and it was just, tragic, really. If you consider yourself truly brave, go watch it. Go watch the 900 snaps that Kenneth Murray was on the field for. And look, I don't mean to sit here and pile on Kenneth Murray. I don't think you need me to sit here and tell you that he didn't play well this year. By all accounts, he's a good teammate. and seems like a good enough guy. I think he had a child this offseason. Shout out to the Murray family. Well, the previous offseason, I guess. But, man, it was a tough watch for him. He doesn't process quickly. He doesn't process correctly. He habitually will take a bad angle, stop his feet, realize he's out of position, and then run himself out of the play. In that order, by the way. There's a lack of coverage instincts. There is not a high-level understanding of zone coverage. And sort of the whole sell with Kenneth Murray is that he's a great athlete. And that does not translate to run defense. He does not have a lot of physicality when tackling, and he has a penchant for getting blocked, whether that's out in open space or lined up. Guys get their hands on him, and he's done. He's out of the play. He isn't a good blitzer, whether that's technically or just having the physical skill set. And he does technically try to execute his assignment, but it never feels like he's connected to the wider play call or the defense. And it doesn't seem like he gets it. He doesn't understand what his responsibilities are or how his responsibilities can change based on what he's reading. His contract expired. The Cowboys will not be bringing him back, and I think we're all okay with that. I'm kind of going through these guys by snap count, and you might be surprised to hear Shamar James actually took the second most snaps for you this year. And the thing about giving a day 3 rookie, who was a developmental player to begin with, a starter snap count is that it's not always going to be pretty. But I actually walked away feeling a lot better than I anticipated. I mean, there's a lot of room for growth, don't get me wrong, but he made some plays for you this year. And obviously the entire defense was bad, the coordination was bad, the players were bad. No one did him any favors, but watching the tape, I didn't feel like he was the biggest problem on the field for you 9 times out of 10. And for a rookie, I think that's really the best you can ask for. You can tell that he was trying to fulfill his responsibilities, but especially in coverage, it came with a level of roboticism, if you will. It reminded me of a linebacker in Madden, right? He just sort of moves to his spot, to his zone, and stands there and looks around. He's not really reading route combos. He's not really drifting towards the nearest player in his area. He's not covering players. He is covering grass. He's just standing in his zone and waiting for something to happen. He would eventually click and, diagnose the play a little bit and move into a real coverage position. But it wasn't very smooth or instinctual, and he was beat a lot. But there was enough solid moments in coverage and decent enough thump in the run game that I figured, he can get some playing time this next year for sure. I definitely wouldn't feel comfortable giving him the same snap count, a starter snap count. He's an LB3 right now, and I think that's a good place for him to develop a little bit. Maybe he can develop into more of a true starter down the line. Moving on, Jack Sanborn didn't have a complicated year. He started for the first month of the season, and when Overshown came back, we never saw him again. He is a solid between the tackles thumper. He does not have the speed, in my opinion, to get outside or to elevate what is truly a below-average coverage skill set. That Packers game stands out, of course, as he's just not good at it. He doesn't have the instincts to get his head around when he needs to, and he gets beat over the middle pretty consistently. While we're talking about some of these more part-time guys, I might as well mention Damone Clark. He took another trip in the cycle that we've seen the last couple of years. New coaching staff comes in. He's pretty good in camp. He's all right in the preseason, and then he's really bad when it gets to real games. He got cut again. Seems like he's just a practice squad level player at this point. We've had multiple coaching staffs decide that he's not worth putting on the field. I think the Lions picked him up maybe. So he's still in the league, but he seems like a practice squad level player at this point. I think that's safe to say it was a failed draft pick. Man, I was excited about Logan Wilson. I'll hold my hand up and say it. I was excited about Logan Wilson. Or at very least, I was excited about the Logan Wilson trade. Right? And those are a little bit different ideas. Even knowing what I know now about Logan Wilson's quality of play and what happened to our season, I'm not upset about losing that 7th rounder for him. I think at that point in the year, you need help at the position. He's a starter, or appeared to be a starter. And it's just a 7th rounder. You're trying to make a playoff push at that point. I'm not upset about it. But I was really surprised to see that he logged fewer snaps than even Jack Sanborn. Only about 20% of the team's total. And obviously he came in after the trade deadline, so he was never going to log a ton of play for you. But it's clear to me that Eberflus didn't want him on the field. Eberflus did not want to play this guy. If you don't believe me, just look at Week 17. Look at the news that came out about Week 17 and the coaching mistake in Week 17 where he didn't see the field at all. At all. A guy that you traded for. Just sat on the bench all game. Wilson did wind up announcing his retirement a few weeks after being released by the Cowboys, which I think says a lot about his level of play towards the end. Even the player understood that he just wasn't able to perform the way he used to be able to. To me, he was never a spectacular athlete, even coming out of college. And when age came for him and took a step or two away, he just didn't meet the minimum physical requirements to be an NFL starter anymore. Specifically, with that change of direction and burst. You can see it on the field with his tape where his eyes are moving a lot faster than his feet can carry him. He's locked into what is going on for the play. He's locked in on where he needs to be. His body just can't get there in time. It's really almost funny in a tragic way to see him on the field with Kenneth Murray, because Wilson will make the read, see where the ball's going, take his first step, and start to go over there before Murray has even started to analyze the situation. And so I think losing that burst and especially the change of direction ability really hurt his play, because it just puts him in a poor position to make tackles sometimes, and it was really easy for guys to out-athlete him in space. There were still some good, gritty pursuit tackles in there. I think he actually understands his role in zone coverage better than anyone else at linebacker on your team. For Maurice Luafau, it was really disappointing to see him relegated to a true depth piece, sub-package duties, just a special teamer, essentially. And what was even more disappointing was that when he was on the field, you can see why the coaching staff didn't want him out there. He remains the same player. He has an undeniable physicality. He can lay a big hit just like Donovan Wilson can, but he has a truly lackluster processor attached to it. A true missile without a guidance system. For every block beaten, there is a boneheaded penalty. He gets knocked out of the player onto the ground way too much. And he has this out-of-control tackling style that leads to a lot of missed tackles. He doesn't understand zone in a way that reminds me of Shamar James with that roboticism, that Madden linebacker. And I think even as a rookie, Shamar James is a clear step ahead of him in that regard, because at least James would eventually trigger on something. I hardly saw that in Luafau's tape. There was a lot of hustle and physicality on display for this player, but he just has a tendency to overrun the play, and he has an inability to get off blocks. He's not the biggest guy, so that block shed is not a true plus for him. And so it's just really hard for him to make an impact. And offenses loved, and I mean loved, to see Luafau lined up in the flat, because he would consistently get too far upfield, lose his guy in coverage, and they just throw the ball over his head for an easy first down completion on a swing pass or a screen or anything like that. And it just got sad to a point where anytime I saw him out there, it's like, okay, we're going to see another one. So he's just a liability out there. And even when he was in position, a plus skill player could juke him out pretty easily. It doesn't have to be Jahmyr Gibbs out there. Just a good starter was able to leave him in his cleats behind pretty consistently out there in space. It was announced that they're going to move him out to that outside linebacker / edge position that Christian Parker's implementing now that we're doing more of a 3-4 system. And that makes sense to me, because I think the blitzing is the best thing that he does. He's got a little juice there. He fights with his hands a little bit. And he's a former third-round pick, so I understand that you're just trying to extract value from the player at this point and find a role for him, right? But simply put, I'm just not excited about the guy. I'm not excited about the player. He's still young. He does offer special teams value. Maybe he can develop under Christian Parker, who's a better DC than Matt Eberflus, or at least we hope. I think we all assume and hope that we'll be getting better coaching there. But I don't see that he has some great skill set to be a pass rusher. He doesn't have some crazy bend or burst around the edge. I didn't see a ton of pass rushing moves. He can hand fight a little bit, but there's nothing on tape to me that suggests he'll be anything more than your 5th or 6th depth piece edge rusher. I don't even know if he's guaranteed to make the team, other than he's a 3rd-round pick from 2 years ago. I would love to be proven wrong by Maurice Luafau. Simply put, I'm not excited for the player. I doubt he's going to do anything other than make some flashy special teams tackles for you this year and lose his job come 2027. I have saved the best for last, and it's time to talk about DeMarvin Overshown. And I need to be honest here. It was always weird. It was always ridiculously optimistic and kind of pie in the sky for us as fans to expect a guy like Overshown to come in and save this defense, to save this bottom of the league unit, this historically bad Cowboys defense. And boy, have we seen some bad Cowboys defenses. That was always a stretch. That was always unlikely. And he didn't come in and save the defense. And obviously the player, what we've seen from him is really exciting, but it's safe to say he hasn't established himself as a good starter in the NFL yet. I mean, the most important part of getting better at football is playing football. And through no fault of his own, Overshown just hasn't been able to do that. It's been 3 years now, and he's maybe taken a season's worth of snaps. I think he's been in 19 total games off of 3 years. You know, it's hard to develop when you can't play, man, and he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. But despite these setbacks, his tape was so refreshing, and I think part of it is that I watched the other players first intentionally, you know? But man, he still has it. He still flashes it. I don't think he's quite as fast as he used to be. I think that athleticism did take a bit of a hit following the injury, but you still see it, man. He still is bursty. He still has speed, and he's still an exciting player. I thought he held up in coverage pretty well, and I really liked his run defense this year. He does get hung up on blocks a bit more than you liked, but I mean, just as a player, he isn't as small necessarily, but he's another hybrid safety guy coming out of college, and he's really just 220. You know, he's not some big thumping linebacker. He's not like a Jack Campbell, Alec Anzalone, Leo Chanel. What's his name? That guy who's been like kind of free agent, mercenary run defender for years now. Not that it really matters. But, you know, he's more of a run and chase linebacker. He's never going to be a guy who defeats blocks super consistently. He's not a thumping backer. So that's probably part of it, but he does get hung up on blocks a little bit. But he's seeing the field a lot better in run defense. And it was really good to see that from him. Kind of take another step in diagnosing plays. And to me, that shows a lot of work ethic off the field, right? Because he hasn't been able to play that much. That means he's been watching tape. And as a character guy, I think Overshown has everything you're looking for. And my favorite thing about him is his play style. Man, he's just hungry on tape. You can tell he wants to get involved in every single rep. There's an intensity and a focus that I just love to see from a linebacker especially. It's all the little things that he does, right? It's staying in pursuit across the formation to get a cleanup tackle when Kenneth Murray doesn't do his job right. It's punching at the ball. It's flashing that speed and coverage to get even with the player in his zones. It's anticipating angles and stopping the ball carrier short of the sticks. That term, just a good football player, that gets thrown around a lot, it really does apply to Overshown, except for one area. It's tackling. And look, I didn't walk away from his tape this year thinking, oh, this guy's a bad tackler. I mean, we gotta clean this up. He's a liability out there. That's not what I walked away thinking. In fact, I think he has a really impressive tackling radius. You know, he can really get after a guy who's farther away from him. But there's just a lot of instances where, hey, buddy, you need to wrap up. You need to get your arms around that guy and bring him to the ground. And when you look at the numbers on it, it definitely tracks. PFF has him at a 14.7% missed tackle rate, which for reference is just not good for a starter in the NFL. 64th in the league amongst linebackers with at least 200 snaps. And obviously he didn't play a full season, so all of these rate stats are going to be a little off. But, you know, 200 snaps, 15% missed tackle rate. You're missing tackles at that point. You know, it's not like, you know, it's a significant amount of missed tackles. It was an improvement from 2024, where he was sitting at more of an 18.4% tackle rate. So it's good to see that he's getting better at it. To me, it's just a timing issue. You know, he delivers that initial contact with his shoulder and then brings his arms. Whereas if that was in one continuous motion, he could drive the guy to the ground. But since he's making that initial contact and then bringing the arms, offensive player is able to sort of gain position on him. And the point that Overshown has his arms around the guy, he's really more hanging off to the side instead of squared up ready to make a good tackle, because he brings those arms around so late on occasion. Part of this, to me, is he attempts these really long range tackles. That's part of that tackling radius I was talking about, where he just sort of leaps at the opposing player. It reminds me a little bit of Leofau, but a bit more in control. And he can actually pull it off sometimes. And hey, when it works, it's really fun to watch, honestly. It's great that he can do that. Let's be honest here. It would serve him much better if he could just utilize a more consistent tackling technique, even if we lose a little bit of that range. And it might sound strange, but all of these plays that I'm talking about where he's a little late, he's not tackling super well, he's getting hung up on blocks, those are actually the plays that give me the most optimism for Overshown going forward, because he is this close, and I mean it, this close to making huge plays. Any game, cut up any tape you want. He's the king of almost plays at this point. And that's really exciting to me, because can he shave a few milliseconds off of his reads now that if he can stay healthy and play a little bit more, log some experience? Can he stay healthy, especially in the lower body, long enough to really heal and come back and get that half step, that quarter step back that he lost? Can he tackle a bit more consistently? Or even can we just utilize him in the blitz a little bit? That was so frustrating. He was really good at that in 2024 under Mike Zimmer. He comes back and Eberflus barely uses him to blitz. If one of those things can happen, let alone all of them, we're talking about a really good linebacker. Maybe even a great linebacker, potentially. And so that's what linebacker was like in 2025 for the Dallas Cowboys. It's not fun to talk about, especially because when the only real shining light in this situation is Overshown, who has played maybe 19 games. I think he's been active in 19 games for his first 3 years with the Cowboys. Maybe taken one season's worth of snaps. And so in a way, it's really great to see that he's still progressing despite hardly getting to play. But this is going to be the last year of his rookie deal. And so as we move into the future section of this video, even if he comes out and has an awesome season, and you put on your rose-tinted glasses and you think, oh, this guy's going to be a Cowboy for life, let's be honest here. He can't stay healthy. Are the Cowboys really going to give him a big money deal after this season, even if he plays phenomenal? And if they do you feel great about that? Do you think this is a guy who can consistently be on the field for you and be a part of your defense going forward? Talk about recklessly optimistic, man. That's just not good process. And the only other guy who's coming back for you, and maybe it's a bit of a addition by subtraction thing with some of these guys. No one's missing Kenneth Murray, right? Is Shamar James, who's again still developing. And to me, he's more of an LB3 at this point. I don't want to give him starting snaps the whole year. Maybe if he can go and take a guy's job in training camp, awesome, good for him, and I'd love to see it. I still have a lot of hope for Shamar James. Like I said, I walked away impressed from the tape I saw. But this position is without a doubt the Cowboys' biggest need. And it has been since the season ended. And the Cowboys know this because they were, reportedly at least, really in on several of these free agent linebackers. Nakobe Dean, Devin Lloyd, Quay Walker, and, maybe, what's his name? I'm losing everybody's name today, but that Pittsburgh linebacker. There was some, Devin Bush, I think, yeah. There was some talk about him as well, but I guess the Cowboys weren't really that interested. The report, and I don't want to give the Cowboys credit for an almost deal, but the report is the Raiders and the Cowboys had the same offer for Nakobe Dean on the table, and Dean chose to go play with the Raiders. Good for him. Let's be honest here. Money talks to these players. That's what they're here for, right? That's what the new contract is for for the generational wealth. You can't tell me you throw a couple million on the APY for Nakobe Dean, he doesn't come play in Dallas. And I get that the Cowboys don't spend big in free agency, and they don't want to be seen overpaying in free agency, but this position is in dire straits. And by the time March 10th rolled around, the free agent linebacker class had been pretty much picked over. There's still some guys out there. You got guys like Bobby Wagner, Matt Milano, Shaq Thompson, even, kind of a lower tier, maybe Jermaine Pratt, Jelani Tavai, who are older players, true veterans. I mean, talk about Bobby Wagner. Used to be one of the best players in the league. Now he just doesn't really have the speed to do much more than be an inside thumper. Kind of Jack Sanborn in that way at this point. Obviously a totally different class of player, but he doesn't have it physically anymore. Then there's some young, unproven guys like Curtis Robinson from the Niners last year. But really the only exciting name that we've been able to hear about this is Jordan Brooks. And look, I'm not sitting in any of these front offices. I don't know if the Dolphins really want to trade Jordan Brooks. I don't know if the Cowboys are really interested in getting Jordan Brooks. But he's by far the best player that we've seen floated around. And you know what? Maybe after the draft we see something like the George Pickens move, right? Or they'll trade for a starter if they need one. Because if Luafau's really not going to line up at inside linebacker anymore, which I am okay with, that's fine by me, then you really only have 2 linebackers, and one of them has a huge injury history. So you need at least 3 guys, and boy, you'd really like at least 2 of them to be able to step on the field and start for you for at least a couple games. One of them ideally would be a locked-in LB2 to sit with Overshown. And so you're completely barren at this position. You have almost nothing at this position when the only shining light in the whole room is DeMarvion Overshown, who is injured and only has 1 year on his deal left. Simply put, the draft cannot solve this position on its own. And I desperately hope the Cowboys are not going to reach at this position. Because when you look at how these players, the 2026 linebacker class from the NFL draft lines up with the rest of it, the value doesn't really line up for you to get a linebacker, right? The 2 top prospects, Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles. Most people think Reese is more of a pass rushing edge, Micah Parsons figure. They might not make it to you at 12. No one knows for sure, obviously, how this draft thing is going to go, but there's no guarantee that you're going to get one of those guys at 12, especially after they both had such impressive pre-draft processes. And that next tier of players, and there's some debate among this, for me it's probably Jacob Rodriguez, but CJ Allen, Anthony Hill, Golday's kind of in that conversation as well. Those guys are more of day 2, day 3 picks. Kind of a late first, early second sort of deal with Allen and Rodriguez and maybe Hill as well, depending on who you talk to, right? Everyone has different opinions about the linebacker class. I really like Trotter in maybe like round 3, that pick we got for Osa. I'm just saying. So a trade up or back could help the Cowboys avoid a reach on this position, but who knows if the phones are going to be ringing when it comes down to it. There has been a lot of talk about trading 12 and 20 to the Browns, that you could get 6 and I think it's 39 is their second round pick. Where at 6 you'd be guaranteed to get one of those blue chip defensive players in this class. And at 39, you're thinking one of these edges or corners or hopefully linebackers that we liked at 20 will still be there. And that we're not going to be, with this draft class in particular, with there being kind of a lack of star-studded talent at the top, not going to be getting that much worse of a player at 20 to 39. And so if that's something the Cowboys can pull off, I'm really interested in that. I generally don't like trading up, but I think in this situation it does make a lot of sense. Some more draft picks would help, so trading down, I would be a fan of that. I think we need it at this point as far as rebuilding the defense goes. And it's not like you don't have needs elsewhere, right? To me, you still need an edge rusher. It's just Rashawn Gary, Donovan Ezeraku, and like James Houston. That's it. And, you can always bring Clowney back, I guess, but you don't have pass rushers really lined up. He's, a very cheap signing for Durant at corner. You got injury concerns with Ravel and Bland. I think Ravel's going to get better. I'm not super worried about him, but there are other issues on this defense too. So I don't think you can really afford to go and overdraft a player at 12 or 20 just because you have such an awful need at linebacker. As far as predictions go, I think the Cowboys are going to draft 2 linebackers in this class. I think there's no other option, truly. To me, I either see it being like a first or second round pick, one of those Sonny Styles, Jacob Rodriguez, Anthony Hill, CJ Allen, one of those top guys, and then maybe a day 3 guy, or 2 middle round players, like Golday and Trotter, or Trotter and I'm not sure exactly how the board's going to fall, but something like that. And I think depending on the quality of players you get out of the draft is going to directly coordinate to how big of a splash the Cowboys are going to make post-draft at this position. Because to me, you have 3 spots you need to fill. 2 of them are going to be draft picks. 1 of them is going to be an outside player. If you end up with 2 day 3 guys, maybe we do see a Jordan Brooks trade. Whereas if we do get Styles and Trotter on day 3, then, maybe it'll be more of a veteran, one of those guys we talked about earlier, like Jelani Tavai or Bobby Wagner, Matt Milano, Shaq Thompson. One of those guys who can come in, be a contributor for you, be a leader in the room, help these guys develop a little bit. Maybe a guy like Jermaine Pratt, just a solid depth piece that you could get pretty cheaply. I think will be the strategy in that case. But either way, even if things go great for Overshown this year, there is just no guarantee that he's going to be back in 2027. And so no matter how great this offseason goes, in my opinion, I don't think the instability at linebacker for this team is over, barring a truly stellar draft. You know, if you walk away from the draft with 2 starters at linebacker, obviously things are going to be looking a little different for you. But we've thought that before with LVE and Jalen Smith, so nothing is really certain at this point in the year. Super excited to see the draft coming up. At the end of the day, we don't know what the Cowboys are going to do. We don't know what this linebacker room is going to look like. The only thing that we do know is Dallas wants hardware.